She didn't whisper it. She didn't negotiate it behind closed doors. She said it on national television. Caitlin Clark looked straight into the camera and drew a line in the sand. This isn't about development anymore. This is about dominance, a championship or nothing. And in that single moment, the entire trajectory of the Indiana Fever snapped into focus. Because what followed wasn't hesitation, it was an execution. Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White didn't respond with promises. They responded with action. The moment free agency opened, Indiana didn't participate. They moved like a team already ahead of the league's timeline. 4 signings, 4 immediate answers. Every move is calculated, every weakness targeted, every decision engineered for one objective, winning it all. And now the question isn't whether Indiana believes they can contend. It's whether the rest of the league just realized they're already behind. Do you really know what led to the league's most shocking roster shift? Quiz: how many major signings happened on the first day of free agency? A, 1B, 2C, 3D, 4 pressure, drama, and glory. Who comes out on top? Let's see if you know. Mitchell gets her respect. Before anything else could happen, before any new faces could walk through the door, Indiana had to take care of the player who earned it the most. And the stakes around this one were higher than most people realize. Kelsey Mitchell re-signed with the Indiana Fever on a 1-year Supermax deal worth $249,244.
Kelsey Mitchell is staying with the Fever after agreeing to a new contract.
A massive contract.
Making her the first player in franchise history to sign a deal of that magnitude under the new CBA, right alongside A'ja Wilson as one of the first Supermax contracts handed out league-wide. Without this signing, the rest of the offseason looks completely different. Mitchell is the engine that makes the Clark backcourt work. Lose her, and you're not just losing a scorer. You're losing the entire offensive architecture that made Indiana dangerous in 2025. But the money hits differently when you know the backstory. Mitchell stayed with the Fever through a 5-win season in 2022, one of the worst records in the league that year. Stayed when the roster around her was genuinely hard to watch. Stayed when she'd already been through 4 head coaches in her first 7 years in Indiana. 4. That level of organizational instability breaks most players. Mitchell absorbed it all and kept showing up.
Miss there from Lloyd. Clark, the fling ahead. Oh, what a dime! And Mitchell lays it in!
She could have pushed her way out and nobody would have blamed her. Other players in her position have demanded trades for far less. Mitchell chose loyalty, and that loyalty, nearly a decade of it, is the reason she's now the highest paid player in Fever franchise history. Ready to see if your instincts are spot on? That's correct. D, are you sharp enough to keep up? Comment and prove it. Coming into this offseason, the tension around her situation was real. She'd earned first-team All-WNBA honors after the 2025 season, finished 5th in MVP voting, made the All-Star team, and averaged 20.2 points per game. A player at that level on an expiring deal attracts attention from around the league fast.
But her numbers aren't just eye-popping, they're vital to Indiana's success.
The Fever used the core designation under the new CBA to lock in exclusive negotiating rights before any other team could make a run at her. Sure, that's exactly the right move when you're trying to keep the best backcourt duo in the league intact. Under that designation, Indiana controlled the conversation, and Mitchell chose to stay rather than test what the open market would have offered. The 1-year structure is worth paying close attention to because it's not just about this season. Clark and Boston both become max eligible under the epic provision in the new CBA, and keeping Mitchell on a 1-year deal preserves the cap flexibility Indiana needs to handle those conversations when they arrive. Mitchell betting on herself for 1 year while also going all in on a championship run right now tells you everything. That's a player who wants a ring more than long-term security somewhere else. And the basketball itself makes the contract look like a bargain. When Mitchell attacks downhill off the dribble as well as anyone in the league, draws defensive collapses, and kicks out to Clark in the corners. Defenses can't pick a lane. If they load up to stop Mitchell getting to the rim, Clark gets open looks from three. If they chase Clark off screens, Mitchell has a runway straight to the basket. Mitchell doesn't just complement Clark's game. She actively makes Clark harder to guard.
In the offseason, Clark catch and shoot, hits a three. So good on that pin down action.
And those are two very different things. From 5 wins in 2022 to first team all WNBA in 2025. Mitchell's Supermax isn't charity, it's justice. And it sets a tone for every other player watching this offseason unfold. Because Krauskopf, Cox, and White all went on record saying the Fever are now a destination. That free agents are calling Indiana, not the other way around. And that the culture around this team has completely flipped from something players tolerated to something players actually want to be part of. That's a strong thing to say out loud because there are plenty of WNBA franchises that describe themselves as destinations and then watch their top targets sign somewhere else. Indiana said it and then immediately proved it. Mitchell could have tested the open market. She chose to stay. And the way the front office structured her deal, rewarding loyalty while preserving future flexibility.
Here's Mitchell veering through the paint and lays it in.
Mitchell's so quick, and especially when she gets out in the open floor.
Sent a message to every free agent in the league. If you come here, we will take care of you. We will build around you, and we will put you in a position to win. She's the silent roster takeover. Indiana's offseason priorities have been clear since the moment last season ended. Maximize the window created by Caitlin Clark, stabilize the front court next to Aaliyah Boston, and finally build a rotation that can keep up with a pace and space identity without collapsing defensively in crunch time. That's where the idea of adding a player like Monique Billings becomes more than just roster talk. It becomes a structural argument. Last season, the Indiana Fever showed flashes of becoming a legitimate playoff-level offense. Clark's transition creation changed the geometry of every possession. Boston remained a dominant interior anchor.
Backdoor, nice find. Boston to Mitchell for the finish.
Second time we've seen that connection on the backdoor cut.
But the gap between promising and dangerous consistently showed up at the forward spot next to Boston. Indiana rotated through combinations that brought effort and physicality, including veterans like Tasha Harris, but the fit was not always seamless for a modern, high-tempo system. The issue wasn't effort, it was compatibility. In a system that asks its front court to sprint the floor on every change of possession, defend in space, and still provide efficient finishing without clogging driving lanes? Indiana's power forward role is closer to a hybrid wing than a traditional post. When Clark pushes pace off a rebound or a quick outlet,
Very good job guarding Caitlin Clark. Until now, that's why you don't let her catch it. Another deep three for Clark, her second. She's got 10 points.
the first big down the floor dictates whether Indiana gets early offense or settles into half-court creation. Too often, that first big last season arrived late or occupied the wrong space. That split-second delay is the difference between a clean layup and a set defense. Billings, by contrast, is built for that exact demand profile. She's a high-mobility forward who thrives as a rim runner, finishes efficiently through contact, and doesn't require post touches to stay effective. In transition-heavy systems, like the one Indiana has been trying to fully unlock, her value comes from spacing vertically rather than horizontally. Defenders have to respect her sprinting lanes.
Monique Billings years to come, just a really solid point guard and gets it done, doesn't do a lot of talking.
Which opens driving angles for Clark and collapsing kick sequences for shooters like Kelsey Mitchell. Even more important is defensive flexibility. Indiana's defensive schemes often put Boston in drop coverage, which means the forward must be able to switch, help at the rim, and recover quickly without fouling. Billings' profile as a mobile, defensive energy big makes her a natural fit in that role compared to more stationary post players. But the basketball fit is only half the story. And the other half is chemistry and familiarity, something modern roster construction increasingly treats as real currency. Indiana's coaching staff, led by Stephanie White, has emphasized continuity and shared reps across multiple competition environments. Players like Clark and Mitchell already operate with a strong understanding of timing and spacing from prior shared systems and offseason runs. In that context, adding a forward who has already functioned effectively in similar read and react environments reduces the learning curve dramatically. Billings' value is not just theoretical spacing, it's communication efficiency. The fewer first-year mistakes a lineup has to survive, the faster it becomes playable in high-leverage fourth-quarter minutes. And this is where Indiana's pitch becomes strategically interesting compared to franchises like the New York Liberty or the expansion Golden State Valkyries. Both teams offer strong markets, strong rosters, and established roles.
New York by 5 in overtime. Swin Cash and Teaspoon can barely stand the excitement.
But Indiana can realistically offer something more specific, a clearly defined starting role in a system still being shaped around its two foundational stars. That matters. In modern WNBA roster construction, fit is often more valuable than depth. A player like Billings doesn't move games by dominating usage. She moves games by amplifying the team's best players. If she is positioned correctly, she turns defensive rebounds into immediate pressure, Clark's push tempo into higher percentage looks, and half-court stagnation into constant rim pressure. There is also a strategic financial layer to consider. In a salary-capped league, timing and roster flexibility can matter as much as talent acquisition. Expansion teams like Golden State often distribute value across multiple contributors, while contenders like New York concentrate talent at the top. Indiana's advantage, if executed correctly, is leveraging its core stars while finding undervalued or role-specific pieces who fit precisely into the gaps. That's the entire logic behind pursuing a player like Billings.
She sends the ball up to Monique Billings, and she's able to finish at the rim.
Not star chasing, but system completion. If Indiana can consistently pair Clark's pace with a forward who sprints every possession, finishes efficiently, defends without fouling, and understands spacing instinctively, the offense becomes significantly harder to scheme against. Defenses can no longer load up on Clark at the point of attack without paying for it at the rim. That's the real offseason swing, not just adding talent, but removing friction. Tasha Harris changes everything quietly. Most free agency signings get announced through official team channels, press releases, social media graphics, the whole corporate package. Tasha Harris didn't get any of that. Her signing got leaked in the most beautifully accidental way possible. Fever GM Amber Cox and assistant coach Austin Kelly posted a workout video that included Harris, tagged it with the hashtag feeling feverish, and anyone paying attention to the WNBA free agent market immediately knew exactly what that meant. You don't fly someone in for a workout with the GM watching courtside if you're not serious, and you definitely don't post it publicly with that hashtag if the deal isn't basically done. The announcement came before the announcement, and the internet caught it in real time. But beyond the entertaining way it leaked, the Harris signing solves a problem that genuinely kept Indiana up at night heading into this offseason. The backup guard spot needed fixing badly. Sydney Colson tore her ACL last season and won't be available for 2026. The options Indiana had behind Clark and Mitchell last year are gone.
Indiana, without the great Caitlin Clark, was the hottest team in the league, and they're still 7-3 over their last 10 games.
And what replaces them can't just be a warm body holding the clipboard until the starters come back. When Clark sits, the offense cannot stall and wait for her to return. Someone on that bench needs to initiate, run pick and rolls, make quick decisions under pressure, and keep the pace from dying. That's a specific skill set that most backup guards in the WNBA simply do not have. Harris spent time with the Connecticut Sun and in one of the most defensively disciplined organizations in the league, and she learned how championship caliber teams operate from the bench up. She shoots right around 40% from three on her career numbers. She's only 27 years old, so she's not a stopgap rental. She defends with intensity. She pushes pace without forcing the issue, and she's been described by analysts as a Mario Chalmers type, a plus defender who can run an offense without turning it into a mess. Stephanie White's system rewards exactly that profile. Guards who decide fast in the pick and roll, hit corner threes off movement, and stay attached on defense. Harris checks every single one of those boxes at a price point that doesn't eat into the cap space Indiana still needs for the rest of the roster.
Harris matches the score at 2 apiece, so it'll be Jones, Thomas. A 10-2 run right now for Washington.
Harris also grew up in the region, which adds a layer of personal investment that you can't manufacture. She's not just filling a roster spot, she's coming home to compete for something real. And suddenly, Indiana's bench looks like something you'd actually trust in a playoff game, rather than a unit you'd hide and hope nobody notices. Think about what that means for Stephanie White's rotation planning. Last season, when Clark needed a breather, the offense would visibly slow down. The ball movement got stagnant. Possessions turned into isolation attempts that went nowhere. Opposing coaches started timing their runs for exactly the moments Clark sat, knowing Indiana's bench couldn't maintain the pace. That vulnerability cost the Fever in close games.
Working on Joyner. Going to the lane, spinning, fadeaway. Got it! Caitlin Clark silences the crowd.
And it cost them in playoff pressure. With Harris running the second unit, White can now stagger Clark and Mitchell's minutes without the offense falling off a cliff. Harris keeps the system moving. She makes the simple, correct play every time down the floor. She doesn't try to be the hero, and she doesn't disappear. That steadiness is worth more than any highlight reel, especially in May and June, when every possession in a playoff game feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Then there's Damiris Dantas, who returns to Indiana on the veteran minimum. This one is different from the other three signings. It's not about a starring role or a positional upgrade. Dantas is a veteran who shoots from the perimeter, prepares the right way, and has been around long enough to understand what a championship push actually feels like from the inside.
Mercury offense is ranked since 2015. It's been the Fever offense that has stolen the show here so far. Dantas.
There's a real question about whether her shooting bounces back after a tough stretch. But at the veteran minimum, the risk to Indiana's cap is essentially zero. If she's sharp, she's a useful rotation piece who spaces the floor and steadies the locker room. If she struggles, the Fever haven't compromised anything to find out. That's smart roster construction. You fill out the edges with low-risk, high-character veterans and save your real money for the players who move the needle. 4 signings confirmed, 4 priorities checked off, and the front office isn't done. Fever championship roster window. Because here's where it starts getting truly dangerous for the rest of the league. The 4 day one signings locked in Indiana's core and fixed the most urgent problems. But the names still circling this franchise could change the ceiling of this roster entirely. Let's start with Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham, because both are expected back. Hull's situation is complicated since she's a restricted free agent, which means Indiana extends a qualifying offer and then watches to see if anyone makes a run at her from outside. If another team tables a number, the Fever have to decide whether they match it or let her walk. Her return isn't automatic, and the front office needs to stay engaged and ready to write a check that might be bigger than they'd prefer. But Hull's value to this team goes way beyond her stat line. She's one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league, shooting 40% from deep over her last 2 seasons, while defending multiple positions with a physicality.
Lexi Hull getting downhill, finds the bucket and 1.
Working on a lot of screening defense
That makes opponents genuinely uncomfortable. She played through 2 black eyes and repeated elbows to the face last season without missing time. That's the kind of toughness you cannot replace. Cunningham flashed real offensive versatility before injuries slowed her in 2025. And her scoring ability alongside Hull's off-ball movement creates wing depth that most WNBA teams genuinely cannot match. She's been Clark's most vocal public supporter, defending her teammate in interviews with a bluntness that's rare in professional sports. Losing either Hull or Cunningham leaves Indiana thin at a position where they need players who can guard and score on the same possession. The Treslacious trio of Clark, Hull, Awa, and Cunningham has already proven it works. Breaking it up would be a mistake, and the front office knows it. But the 2 names that could genuinely transform this roster from very good to historically dangerous are Alana Smith and Azura Stevens. Smith guards multiple positions, shoots from distance, and switches onto guards in pick-and-roll coverage without getting lost. That's exactly what Indiana needs when a playoff opponent starts hunting mismatches in a close series. She's publicly expressed interest in the Fever and has said she'd be doing herself a disservice if she wasn't exploring opportunities beyond Minnesota, where she played last season. Stevens is 6'6", scores in the post, and defends with a length that most WNBA forwards simply don't have. She shot 38% from 3 on 4.4 attempts per game in 2025, while averaging 12.8 points and 8.0 rebounds with the Los Angeles Sparks. And here's the detail that makes her such a perfect fit for what Indiana is building. She doesn't need to be the primary option or the second option or even the third option to be effective. She was none of those things in Los Angeles, and she still produced at a high level every single night. That's exactly what makes her so dangerous in a system where Clark and Mitchell are already generating the majority of the offense. You put Stevens next to Boston in the front court, and opposing coaches have to pick their poison.
It just feels really good to be back. I feel so much love and support here, so I'm just super excited.
Double Boston inside, and Stevens steps out to the 3-point line. Close out hard on Stevens, and she pump fakes, puts the ball on the floor, and attacks the closeout with a mini pull-up that defenders cannot contest because of her height advantage. She does it all offensively without needing plays called for her, and defensively her wingspan changes the geometry of every passing lane on the court. Stevens took it a step further than just expressing interest publicly. She posted a photo of herself in a Fever jersey on social media. In WNBA free agency, that's not a casual moment. That's a player telling the entire market exactly where she wants to play. Picture the full roster if Smith and Stevens both sign. Clark and Mitchell in the backcourt. Boston anchoring the interior.
Kennedy Burke has missed a 3 in the last 3 games. She had made 7 in a row over her last.
Billings providing size and floor spacing. Smith switching onto guard. Stevens defending and scoring in the post. Harris running the second unit. Hull and Cunningham rotating at the wings. Dantas as the veteran presence off the bench. That's not a team hoping to compete. That's a roster built to win playoff basketball in every single matchup. But the cap math is genuinely tight. Mitchell's Supermax, Clark's $528,846 salary, and Boston's potential max contract under the Epic provision could push those 3 alone toward $3.1 million out of a roughly $7 million total cap. That leaves just under $4 million to fit everyone else. And in 2027, the salaries around Clark, Boston, and Mitchell get significantly more expensive. This window is real, but it's closing fast. Every signing from this point forward is a needle being threaded without blinking. And now everything goes quiet. No announcements, no headlines, no immediate answers, just the slow, The tightening pressure of expectation settling over Indianapolis like a storm that hasn't broken yet. Caitlin Clark has already drawn the line. Championship or nothing.
This is where it happened just a little while ago, and Caitlin Clark's goal this season.
And the front office, led by Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White, has already responded with speed that changed the entire tone of the league. But in a league built on margins, on last possessions, missed rotations, and late season fatigue, responses don't win titles. Execution does. What's been built in Indiana is no longer theoretical. It's no longer about potential or projections. It's about chemistry under pressure, durability over time, and whether every piece fits when the game slows down and the stakes rise. Because the regular season doesn't just reward talent, it exposes imbalance. And that's where the real story begins. Every signing, every adjustment, every gamble this front office made will eventually be measured against a single standard. What happens in April pressure, July fatigue, and the final unforgiving stretch toward the playoffs. There will be nights when it looks inevitable, and others where everything feels fragile again. So as training camp approaches and the season looms just beyond the horizon, Indiana stands at a strange intersection, part promise, part warning. A roster assembled quickly enough to scare the league, but tested long enough to prove it. And in the middle of it all is Clark, no longer waiting, no longer asking, only watching as the vision she put into words begins to take shape in real time. But the question that hangs over everything is still unanswered, and now it matters more than ever. When the season finally demands more than belief, more than momentum, more than headlines, will this version of the Indiana Fever hold? Or will we look back at this moment as the point where expectation became heavier than the team itself?